Hello, everyone. My name is Jeanette Flores O'Brien. I am a native and a first-generation Mexican-American college graduate, current library school student at San Jose State University, mother of 3 avid readers, and the Media Advocacy Fellow here at the National Hispanic Media Coalition. NHMC is a 501c3 women-led nonprofit civil and human rights organization that was founded to eliminate hate, discrimination, and racism toward the Latinx communities, and our mission and efforts extend to any and all underrepresented communities in media and policy. Today, we are going to be discussing the banned book epidemic in the United States. We will also be identifying specific pro-censorship groups and their tactics, along with a call to action for parents and patrons alike in the efforts to maintain our freedom to read in schools and libraries. We have the following panelists joining us today. Megan Cusick is the Deputy Director for the State Advocacy, Public Policy, and Advocacy Office at the American Library Association. Known to many of us in the library world as the ALA, it is the oldest and largest library association in the world. Founded in 1876, the ALA's mission is to provide leadership for the development, promotion, and improvement of library and information sciences and the profession of librarianship in order to enhance learning and ensure access to information for all. Thank you very much for being with us today, Megan.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Macey Morales, who is the Director of Communications at the National Coalition Against Censorship. NCAC was formed by a group of activists affiliated with the ACLU in 1973 and is composed of over 50 national nonprofit organizations that engage in advocacy and education in support of our First Amendment rights. Thank you, Macey.
Thank you for having me today.
Thank you. All right, now we have Kasey Meehan, who is a Freedom to Read Program Director at PEN America. PEN America was founded in 1922 and works to ensure that people everywhere have the freedom to create literature, to convey information and ideas, to express their views, along with the freedom to access views, ideas, and literature of others. Thank you for being with us today, Kasey.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me and for facilitating this conversation.
Thank you. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Let's jump right in. According to PEN America Index of School Bans for the period of July 2021 to June 2022, 40 to 41% of books targeted for removal feature characters of color, cover race and racism in American history, and or LGBTQ+ identities. And now my question to you is, who decides what books to remove from bookshelves at public schools and libraries? Macey, if you could start us off, please.
Sure. Well, normally schools have selection processes in place, and those policies are basically developed by administrators as well as school boards. There isn't necessarily a one-size-fits-all approach to developing review policies, but when books do not match the policies that are in place, that's when they're targeted or slated for removal. I think our greatest concern right now is the fact that you have many conservative groups in place right now that are able to have a say within those policies. I believe that my colleagues who are on the call today probably have a bit more of behind the scenes information about how those policies are actually developed. So I'll kick it over to them.
Macey's absolutely right. Schools and libraries, public libraries, are under local control. So it can look different depending upon location. We do have best practices, and in some cases, state law that requires public schools and libraries to have collection development policies. They are approved, as Macey mentioned, by local governing boards, and they include a process for reconsideration. Often when an individual objects to a particular item, that process begins with an informal conversation so that that person's concerns can be heard. If the conversation isn't or doesn't resolve those concerns, then a formal process can be initiated. And usually that starts with a request for reconsideration form that triggers a formal process. And that may include a review committee of community stakeholders that read and discuss the entire book before making a decision. I think it's important to note right now that good policies are critical to ensuring transparency and consistency. And as this current movement highlights all too well, people bring different perspectives and different opinions to the information they consume. So the job of a professional librarian is to leave their personal opinions at home and curate a collection that reflects a variety of voices, a variety of viewpoints, and a variety of experiences so that everyone sees themselves and has an opportunity to learn about other people. This is so particularly important for young people who need to be informed, develop empathy, and be empowered so that they can be fully engaged in society today. What we see right now in terms of book challenges is completely different because challenges to reading materials, while they used to come from an individual who had a direct encounter with a book that they read or that their child brought home, we now see groups circulating lists of books on social media with talking points about why they should be challenged, or we see lists of keywords that are posted and people are given instructions on how to search school or public library catalogs. So this is not about encountering a book. This is about going after ideas. And that makes adhering to policies even more important. And it also makes this attack on ideas even more scary.
I think I'll really just echo, and I love where Megan left it, that right, this is like a shifting landscape that we're currently in the middle of, where there are sort of these bans are very explicitly targeting ideas rather than sort of following historic practices of like coming across a book, having a specific objection to a specific title and bringing that book forward to review committees and district administrators, and sort of following the procedures that have already been in place to formally review that book and make a decision. Over the last few years, we've seen this landscape change where book bans are the result of newly enacted legislation, coordinated efforts from sort of politically and ideologically motivated movements, and also what we at Penn call sort of this like ed scare and chilling effect, where sort of preemptively pulling books off shelves as administrators and educators and librarians are worried that a particular book may be out of compliance with, say, a legislation or a new school board policy, or some other sort of intervention from the state to really challenge books, again, based on sort of the ideas that are presented. You opened us earlier with the idea that, or the data point that books that are being pulled are disproportionately about people of color, race and racism, sex, experiences of LGBTQ individuals or authors by authors that are LGBTQIA community. So there's a very specific through line here that's censoring certain types of books. And almost to go back to your question, I think, Penn America really believes that books belong on shelves. They don't belong in storage units or behind desks in restricted centers, but books really belong on shelves where they're accessible for students and educators and librarians in a larger school community.
And I totally agree with that. And also one thing that we are seeing across the country, as you had mentioned, Kasey, this issue of removing titles before they're even reviewed, we're hearing of some school districts removing hundreds of books at a time, anywhere from 100 to 300 titles, because they don't necessarily agree with the viewpoints that many of these titles express. So there's a big problem here. And thank you so much for having us on today to discuss this issue.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Megan, you all brought up great points. And Megan, something that stuck with me is how you talk about the importance of youth seeing themselves in literature and what they're reading, which leads me into the next question. What are some of the repercussions that we are seeing in POC communities as a result of book bans and challenges?
I think there are several concerning repercussions, a few of which have just been raised. One is that culture of fear results in the soft censorship, the removal of books, or the refrain from purchasing or adding books to a library collection or classroom for fear of generating controversy, or for fear of running afoul of state laws, or for fear of jobs, losing one's job or being threatened with criminal prosecution. So there's that very real chilling effect. Of course, that also leads to the very real concern that communities, and in some cases entire states, are going to have difficulty attracting and retaining library and education professionals. We've already seen tremendous hits on the professions because of the impacts of COVID. And this is really adding another pressure that some folks are choosing not to to work through, but are resigning or leaving their positions. And, we want our public institutions to be staffed by professionals who have experience and training in their areas of expertise. So that's a real loss. But of course, most concerning is that we're seeing this resurface or perpetuate trauma in communities of color, in LGBTQ communities, and in religious minority communities. And I'm particularly concerned about what that does to young people, the effect on young people who are hearing and unfortunately sometimes internalizing negative and often, quite frankly, toxic messages, which is the antithesis of what libraries do and the antithesis of what schools do. We welcome everyone. We invite everyone to share in the empowering experience of building knowledge, of learning together, and of advancing opportunity. I do want to add one other thing, and that is that these conversations are a huge distraction from addressing real problems in our communities, whether it's helping kids reintegrate into academic and social life in school, or helping people thrive in their workplace, or ensuring that communities have the information and ability to participate in our democratic processes. So there are many, many effects, some very visible and some less so.
And Megan, I totally agree with you. I think the action alone speaks volumes to students, especially students of color. Imagine, if you will, being a child and seeing a group of adults basically telling you you're not worthy of being represented in collections. That is huge and traumatic. And I can only imagine what some of these children in very conservative communities are feeling. The Trevor Project actually puts out a survey every year. It's a survey among GLBTQIA plus individuals about suicide attempts, and how many suicides have occurred throughout the United States. Their 2022 numbers came out not too long ago. And they found that 45% of that community of youth have considered suicide. That's up 3 points from last year. And when doing a bit more digging into those numbers, it's because there is no support there for that community. Books provide support. They provide comfort to those who are looking for representation, who are trying to find a place in this world. There are ways of letting youth know that they are not alone. And so I think that as adults move forward and they continue this type of behavior, they should really think about the impact that it's having on students, and students who need our support, and students who need understanding.
Yeah, I think what Megan and Macey so well shared here is that it really does affect sort of an ecosystem of students, of educators, of librarians, of administrators, of the burden that this puts on just school systems and educational systems in general. At Penn America, I also want to offer another group, which is authors and illustrators and agents and publishers. And I think something that, I've been reflecting on a little bit, like personally, but certainly at the context of working at Penn, is we, a few weeks ago, released a report on publishing and how publishing underrepresents Black and brown and queer authors. And I've been reflecting on this in the context of book bans, where you see books being banned in K-12 spaces that disproportionately affect, Black, brown, and queer authors and identities that are represented in books. And then, as adults begin to have fluency and capacity to purchase books, where do adults go? They go where the things that they know and where they grew up learning, and their beloved authors that they were exposed to, in elementary school and in middle school and in high school. And by pulling this representation away from those experiences, I'm like, well, yes, of course, we see this underrepresentation at publishing houses because we're seeing it in K-12 and like learning spaces as well. And I think that's, to me, I think about, just that a lot. And what does that mean for authors of color and, how they are underrepresented by these big publishing units, but their books are, not available. I think about this in the context of children's lit books and young adult books, and how that's already sort of an under-resourced genre in general. And those are the books that we see time and time again being sort of targeted in K-12 spaces when it comes to book banning. So again, sort of just like this community perspective, I think it's unique that, Penn and ALA and NCAC can be here together because we all sort of have different constituaries or like, groups that we love. And all of us, center students and librarians and educators and authors and illustrators in this sort of horrific phase of censorship we're sitting in right now. So anyway, I just offer that as well.
Thank you so much. Actually, we could focus for a minute on a specific group who is at the forefront of calling to ban books. We have pro-censorship organizations like Mom for Liberty calling for book bans. At the same time, they are attempting to differentiate or distance themselves from calling it what it is, censorship. In response to general public calls to cancel Justice Amy Coney Barrett's book, Tiffany Justice, co-founder of Moms for Liberty, stated, quote, "We're not looking to ban books. There were people that don't want the book to be published. That's banning books. Our moms are saying, write the book, publish the book, print the book, sell the book wherever you'd like to sell it, but don't put it in the public school library if it has explicit sexual content in it," end quote. Now, could you give us your take on this? And how do parents get involved in countering efforts like Moms for Liberty that are working to ban books in schools by citing their parental rights?
There's so much to speak to here. So maybe we're all like, where do we begin? I think, I want to take, I just want to I'll hone in on 2 points and then I'll let Macey and Megan sort of, add color commentary beyond what I don't get to. But I think first, in some ways, I think, sort of the ideals of public school in this context are also a bit threatened. They're being pushed against. We at Penn America see public school as the fabric of democracy and public libraries, demanding of special First Amendment protection, which means that, even if you can go buy a book, that book still belongs, in public libraries. So this attack on public libraries, on classroom libraries, on school libraries, on classroom curricula. It's a tool among a suite of tools to really push at what it means to offer public education for our students. And then I also just want to sort of hone in on this phrase of explicit sexual content here as well, which is a phrase we often see in context of removing books from libraries and classrooms. And the books that get swept under this language are often books on sex. They have potential mentions of sexual assault, books with images of bodies, books with LGBTQ identities. And I just want to sort of really iterate here that these books are not sexually explicit. They have been selected through long-standing material selection processes and procedures. And what we see more and more is parts of the book or specific images or parts of excerpts of text that are being used to demonstrate that this book in its entirety has explicit sexual content without taking the book as a whole and without considering, the entirety of a book for its artistic and intellectual and valuable contribution that it brings to school libraries and to learners. So I think we see this like censorship kind of machine using these terms and these language to really sweep up books. In all types of books. And I think just that language in itself, I just want to, sort of iterate that, books are not sexually explicit. Pieces of books may have sexual content in them, but as a whole, books that are being targeted often uplift narratives of resilience, of overcoming adversity, over being aware of one's bodies, and thinking about consent and choice, and all these sort of narratives that are just critical for young students and all students really to have access to. So I'll pause there and pass to Macey and Megan to elaborate.
Sure. I think one thing to also keep in mind is that, we all have First Amendment rights. And even Moms for Liberty have those rights. But, that is an individual right. The problem is that these conservative groups are inflicting decisions and policies for the whole community. So we need to really understand that everyone has the right to read. And of course, parents have the right to very much get involved in their child's education and what their child reads. But that parent doesn't get to decide for the other members in the community. So I think we really need to be mindful of that.
I agree completely with Kasey and Macey. And I would say, a couple other things. One is that those comments that you read really reflect the narrow and privileged view of an individual, because when a book is prohibited from being available in the one place that a young person can access it, that is a ban. Not everyone can drive to a local bookstore. Not everyone can afford to purchase materials. So, that really does reflect a certain privilege. And I think that it's just one of the many problematic issues with Moms for Liberty. From their dark money funding to their faux grassroots branding, to their association with some groups that are spewing really hateful rhetoric. They are claiming that they don't co-parent with the government, but the fact of the matter is they're trying to use the power of government to force others to conform to very narrow beliefs about parenting, about schooling, and about who can fully participate in this society. And that's about as anti-liberty as you can get, in my view.
I absolutely agree, Megan. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to move on to the next question here. I'd actually like to discuss some initiatives that your organizations are spearheading. If I could actually start with Macey. Macey, is there anything you'd like to share with us that NCAC is currently working on?
The Kids Right to Read project is part of the NCAC's Youth Free Expression Program. And this program, we work with educators, we work with librarians, with authors, and we provide them with the resources and tools they need to advocate for the freedom to read. There are several resources on our website that everyone's welcome to go to. And with the Kid Right to Read program, we also offer a map of different challenges that have taken place throughout the country. So your viewers are welcome to go there to get a bit of insight of the type of book challenges and book bans that are taking place across the country. We also have a Student Advocates for Speech program that is offered, also known to us as SAS. This is a student-led program where students across the country have developed banned book clubs, and basically have fought for the freedom to read in their communities. We've worked with them to provide them with mentorship, to provide them with resources and the tools that they need in order to address the challenges that are taking place in their community.
Thank you for sharing, Macey. Kasey, would you like to share any initiatives that PEN America has currently working on?
Yeah. So at PEN America, our Freedom to Read team is thinking about our approach to combating book bans across three sort of core strategy areas. The first, PEN America, is similar to NCAC and ALA's tracking, researching and reporting and bringing sort of broad and heightened awareness to where we see book bans and book challenges happening across the United States. We've also started like partnering with local organizations in where we see sort of like large unprecedented numbers of book bans to mobilize against book banning at very localized efforts. So at the school level, at the district level, at the state level as well. So thinking about really grassroots sort of mobilization to help fight against ongoing book banning that we are seeing. And then thirdly, we often look to collaborate with amazing partners like NCAC and ALA on Unite Against book bans, and in other sort of youth institutes and other sort of partnerships where we can continue to really elevate and engage with folks more broadly to just, again, sort of sound the alarm that censorship is happening. And it's, has a range of implications for students and educators and librarians and our public educational infrastructure and authors and publishers and sort of the ecosystem that we all spoke to, and also offer opportunities to really begin to push back against this censorship movement. I did want to tie back to an earlier question, which I potentially skipped around, just like ways to getting involved. So there are lots of, I just want to sort of end with that. There is sort of counter resistance to, sort of the groups that we have talked about, such as Moms for Liberty and other sort of politically motivated groups that are driving a censorship movement forward in our public spaces. But there is a counter resistance of parents, of students, of librarians and media specialists on the ground as well. So one thing you could do is like find your local organization, find your sort of community of people, and potentially go to a school board meeting or check in with the library and see, if any books have been restricted in the academic year. Flag that to one of the three wonderful organizations here. Let us know. I mean, we're happy to sort of bring heightened awareness to where we're seeing censorious attempts in our public ed spaces. And then also, we have, again, I just like, so right there. So there's lots of folks, I would say, in the fight against book banning. And certainly, again, at PEN America, just shouting out authors and illustrators and sort of that body of literary folks as well who are in this fight too. It can be quite hard and quite exhausting to always defend against one's craft and one's work as an author or illustrator who has been banned. And so many banned authors in our network really just stand behind students and parents and librarians and school administrators as they call on, school boards and districts and states to keep books in the classroom and on, public classroom library shelves and school library shelves.
So one of the things that we are fortunate about in this fight is that we really do have an amazing community of people who are working to ensure that now and moving forward, the right to read, the right to access information, the right to create information is preserved. And what ALA has done is launch Unite Against Book Bans, the campaign that Kasey mentioned, which is a public-facing advocacy campaign to provide people with information and tools to fight back at the local level. And ALA has long provided direct support to the library community, and we continue to do that. So that work walks alongside the campaign. But this current well-resourced, well-coordinated political attack on the right to read called for a more sweeping approach, which we've all referred to. And that is, most importantly, a coalition of national, state, and local partners, as well as individual advocates. So we're really pleased to have PEN and NCAC as partners in the campaign. We invite NHMC to join us as well. But I will say that ALA conducted polling and research to get the pulse of the country. You won't be surprised to hear that the vast majority of people oppose banning books. The campaign's messaging moves ALA away from that library sort of jargony language to really focus on messaging that connects with the general public and connects across the political spectrum. Because the fact of the matter is, while this is a politically motivated attack on the right to read, most folks from across the political spectrum oppose the banning of books. We know, as Macey was saying, that parents want to be able to make choices for their own children. And don't want other parents making decisions for them. We know that young people need access to information in order to grapple with difficult questions and life situations that they or their peers may encounter. So Unite Against Book Bans has developed some resources, including a toolkit, which enables people to connect with each other locally, to speak up locally, to show up at community meetings. We also have resources to help people understand where candidates for elected office stand, and actually a pledge that candidates can take to affirm their belief and their commitment to fight for the right to read. And I do want to say voting is so important from every single level of government. This is an issue where elected officials need to make their positions clear prior to elections. We need to know where people stand, whether they're running for dog catcher or U.S. Senate. I would encourage people in particular during 2023 to keep an eye on local library board and school board elections. We also have some resources, including a white paper called Empowered by Reading, which examines the benefit to individuals and communities when young people have access to a wide variety of reading materials. And similar to Penn, we're mobilizing partners and individual advocates to take action locally on the ground. I think, there is strength in numbers. There's also strength in bringing different expertise to the table, and in being able to reach different constituencies. So it's a real honor to be with this group today, because I think that, together we are so much stronger.
I completely agree, Megan. Thank you very much. NHMC would like to thank Megan Cusick, Macey Morales, and Kasey Meehan, along with the American Library Association, PEN America, and the National Coalition Against Censorship for their tireless efforts in combating book bans and challenges, along with upholding our intellectual freedom and First Amendment rights. We welcome you to visit their websites, pen.org, ala.org, ncac.org, along with us over at nhmc.org for more information on ways to become involved in the fight against book bans and other initiatives. Thank you for watching. Happy reading.